So maybe I can suggest that we start because I don't want then. And I would like to say first, thank you, welcome. Delighted to welcome you this morning to this first.
Yeah, for sure, Catherine. I'm ready.
To this first breakfast, half in presential and half hybrid. As you can see, if you had come to the chamber, you would have had some nice viennoiserie. But I know for those who are like Richard in Le Gers or for I can't remember some others who are in Budapest or in Dordogne, it's difficult to come here. Anyway, around me, I have my circler, Derek Ferguson. Everybody knows Derek now. Anyway, we don't need to introduce him. And Mr. Daribo, sorry, Alain Daribo, a new member. So we are delighted to welcome you, Richard, this morning to this breakfast, SME Breakfast. When I met Richard a few months ago, he said to me, France is a wonderful country to develop and to set up a business, and made me a millionaire. So you can imagine how I was very surprised. And I said, so Richard, I think you must tell us why you say that and why you think France is a fantastic country to invest and to develop your business and to live in, because you have been living here for quite a long time now. So Richard, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me this morning. Of course, I'll be needing your help to go through the slides because we had a little technical issue this morning, so I'm not in control of the slides, everyone. So I apologise in advance if some things are slightly out of slide context. I'd like to start by telling everyone, first and foremost, I didn't introduce myself to Catherine as a millionaire, far from it. I think that at that point of the conversation, and that's what really marked our first introduction, is I think in the quality of life that you can achieve in France compared to, of course, many other countries. I think the value for money and the everything that France can offer in that sense makes you already a millionaire in the sense that you'd have to have an awful lot more in the UK, for instance, where I spent an awful lot of my time in working life to be able to achieve that. So today, again, thank you for logging in and joining us. The aim was to introduce you, obviously, to myself, because I'm not just French Connections, and this has been a kind of byproduct of my life here in France. And I also, as Catherine mentioned, I'm very much firm believer in that France is a good place to start a business. Contrary to an awful lot of missay, I think, in terms of taxes and regimes, etc., that can be portrayed as a negative. And then an introduction to, I would say, my main source of business today, or my main area of concern, which is French Connections. And actually, I think, Catherine, I can actually change the slides, so this is all cool. So the big statement, France made me a millionaire. Catherine straight away said, yeah, that's it. We're going to start the new year with, or la rentrée scolaire with France made me a millionaire. I think, again, what I mentioned was it was more in the sense that, not financially necessarily, but in the sense that it's proven to be a land of opportunity for me, because I've been able over the years to take the experience that I'd acquired in, I would say, the English working world and in general across the globe of working for American companies and big corporate companies, and being able to apply that in my rural and native France. So over the next, obviously, few slides, that's what I'd like to introduce you to. And in that context, sorry, I think we've gone too quick. How did it make me a millionaire? Well, the first element of where did that statement come from? I think it's the lifestyle. France does teach people, I think, to appreciate the simple things and best moments in life, and that can be, you know, in a bistro at Paris for a lovely lunch, or it can be in southwestern France, where I'm native from, you know, with that kind of different lifestyle, that not so much of a rat race. And in terms of value for money, of course, I mean, I'm talking from my personal experience from relocating from the UK, but also from other countries, just the sheer value for money of properties here in the southwest of France. Obviously, it's not quite the same where you guys perhaps are in Paris, but definitely for us in rural France, there's a massive difference. The real estate, again, I was mentioning it's specific to the Gers, but not only. Of course, there's lots of regions in France which do offer great value for money. Personally, I was able to purchase something a lot cheaper and then develop it, and through that, I was able to create before anything else, before creating French Connections, I was able to develop a small amount of real estate here. And I think that's really important to mention, because that's actually what gave me my financial independence from the corporate environment. And it's a byproduct of those elements. I first came to France working for a big corporate entity, and I was able, through that corporate entity, to borrow money. And I borrowed money from French banks quite easily, because I was working for a big corporate and had a good position there. And the beauty of the French banking system right now is that the rates are very low. So we're talking about 3 years ago. It's not all of that long ago. And what that enabled me to do in a short period of time, especially close to this area of France where I grew up, because I'm from British parents, but I grew up here and spent probably 18, 19 years of my life here studying and growing up in the southern France environment. I accumulated an awful lot of knowledge of people, and that was mainly through my rugby years. So for those that don't know the southwest of France, I can tell you that rugby is a religion down here. And I mention that why? Because it's a very big part of my life and my working life throughout the years here. It creates a community for sure around you, but it also means that you kind of know pretty much everyone. And that helped me build a small real estate entity. So I've got a few businesses in real estate where I buy and sell, but I also renovate and rent. And clearly I wouldn't have been able to do that in the UK, only because I just wouldn't have had, one, the financial backing from the banks, and secondly, I probably wouldn't have been able to afford the massive deposits that would have been required to do such a thing. So that's, you know, painting the picture. A couple of years back, I started doing that. And after, I would say, about 2 years, I'd accumulated enough courage and enough small financial backing from my real estate investments to say, okay, I'm going to stop the corporate life. And that was mainly because, you know, back in those days, I was still traveling all over the globe. This was before COVID. And I was using Toulouse, which is a main international airport, only an hour away from me. So it was no different from commuting to Heathrow every day. And Toulouse airport was very well connected. So I was able to fly everywhere I needed to. But I soon realized that, you know, I just don't, and I can't do this anymore for my family and for things to come. So that's what motivated me to find some form of way out of that rat race. And when I had done that, well, I guess it's a kind of twofold. Unfortunately, this is not all of that long ago, really, in the great scheme of things. And something strange happened to the world. We were launched into a crisis that was unprecedented. So really, at that stage, we were launched into COVID, and I just quit my good job, which was kind of a strange place to be. And I think that moves on really to the next slide, which is why France was a good place for me to start a business. Now, the business that I started, French Connections, that we're going to talk about today, is amongst many others. So as I mentioned, I was able to get some good advice from accountants here, and I started a few businesses in real estate. I know it's maybe funny to you guys, but I also own a couple of laundrettes, automated laundrettes, which I use in my properties, which work really well. And that gave me my first incline onto how to start an actual business in France. And when we come to French Connections, it was just something that was an idea of mine over, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. And I actually registered the company then. At the time, I was a young student working just outside Toulouse, studying marketing and sales. And I got a work experience with a big, well-known car brand. And a lot of my clients ended up being British, or English speaking at least. And what tend to happen is that they would buy cars from me, even though I was only a student and didn't really know what I was doing, I guess, because they wanted somebody that spoke their own language, and more importantly, that could help them with basic tasks. And that could be, opening a phone account, a mobile phone account, helping them with the procedures of buying their house. And so they'd come to me and say, Richard, yeah, we'll buy a car from you, but can you come and help us do this? And I thought, well, maybe there's a business idea there. And my original idea is that I was going to become a broker for big companies and bring them all these English-speaking clients. And then I quickly realized the shortage of my idea back then, because you've got to remember 12, 13 years ago, I know it seems weird, but we lived in a world where internet was not something that was so widely used. And of course, social media certainly wasn't the same, didn't have the same dimension. And I guess my excuse was all of those elements, and also that I was very young and didn't know how to construct or manage a business for sure. But in my simple mind back then, it was, I had to have a lot of money to invest to start a business. And I would then lose the advantage of being able to see these people because I wouldn't be in the car dealership, right? So how would I go and get these people to know about me and introduce them to these companies? So I realized the flaws, but I still registered the business. And I think as a micro-entrepreneur or auto-entrepreneur just came out. That was 12 years or 13 years ago. It was a brand new creation that you could register a small business for free, essentially. And you could start invoicing people. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a cool idea, but really I didn't know how to do it. So I carried on my life and traveled the world and worked for big companies. And eventually when I did come back to France and had that security in real estate, I thought, do you know what? Let's do it. Let's launch this idea of mine. And my idea initially was just to do it locally. So I was going to keep in my region. And there was also a motivation because when we came back to France, I noticed that my partner, Judy, who's British, she was on these Facebook groups, and I could see all of these English people on these Facebook groups, massive amount of people, and asking for services, right? So, the usual things that you see on Facebook groups, how do I register my car? How do I change my driver's license? How do I get a visa? Can I still move to France? What do we do in these circumstances? And at my very small scale, because I was thinking about it very small, I thought, well, I want to do more real estate, and my local artisans and friends need work. So I could see all these guys looking for reliable artisans. I could maybe provide them with, a source to find these people. And I created my little website, and I called it French Connections HCB at the time. And there was two of us working. My nephew that had left his marketing school, just finished his degree, and was looking for a job. And I felt the pain of that at the time of your life when you don't really know what you're going to be doing. And I said, look, I've got this idea, and it might be quite a good idea. And we launched it. So we were completely overwhelmed by the amount of requests we had locally. And what happened is that, I guess, organically, we ended up doing more services than anything else. And so very soon we were like, people were coming to us to register cars and coming to us to help with their visa applications. And we realized, well, do you know what? We're going to have to recruit people that really know what they're doing in these areas. And so it was a real big gamble. We started recruiting people. I think the first person I recruited was actually Diana, who's today on this course, and now managing the integration with the Franco-British Chamber. And Diana was a specialist in visas, and for her curriculum in working in education, she was very comfortable with that. So, but for us, it was a massive gamble, right? We didn't know that we were going to be able to pay her each month, and we did that. And I think what was fair to say is I'd accumulated an awful lot of experience in the corporate world in marketing and digital development. So that's really the source of how we got so big so quickly. And today, of course, we're really fortunate. It's not been easy, but I think we've got only over 10 members of staff, and we actually work now outside of France with expat communities in Italy and Portugal, where we realized that the same issues occurred. But more specifically, to speak into the setting up of the business of France, what I found was extremely good. The elements of the workforce and the landscape that we have here are phenomenal. And that I already knew about, I guess, because the main element I had was that I know that in France, in general, people, I would say, are hyper-educated. You quite often will find that a postman or somebody that works in a restaurant has got a master's degree. And I knew this because I was brought up in this French system. So I think that the workforce element here is one of the major parts of my success, because we get highly educated people that are, very proficient, very hardworking. And I think it's more to do with really the elements of education and the insistence on the fact that everybody really leaves France here with an A level and then goes to university. University is, of course, free, but it's based on the fact that how good are your scorings and your marks. So it's a very fair, equal system, I think, for education. And in general, I've got to say that the younger generations that I've been recruiting are just phenomenal. And I know people have got this conception about millennials and the problems that might incur, but for me, it's just been fantastic. I've been able to recruit some highly talented people, very much motivated and dedicated to doing well. And I think throughout that opportunity, there's the fact that they don't necessarily get opportunities at that level that quickly. So you give a 20-year-old French person with, a degree, an opportunity, I think you will find that they will perform in a fantastic manner. And for my part, most of them are very much interested to work in this anglicized environment. One for, of course, the knowledge and the way, but also for the way of thinking. For my career, when I was in the UK or in America, I was given opportunities based on my knowledge and the way that I worked, not on my age. And I can sadly say that when I was in France, especially in rural France, because I was young, I wasn't given those opportunities. So I think there's this double thing that these young guys are very well educated, but they're also highly motivated to work in companies such as us. The landscape, of course, in France is good. I think I'm a rational optimist. I think we mentioned, one of you guys on the chat was asking about British people leaving the UK and some decrease on the market in the coming years. For me, Brexit has actually been an opportunity, because I think the people that wanted to come to France wanted to come sooner. We do see that there's people coming from the UK back to France, but generally speaking, French individuals coming back to France because of Brexit, but it's not overwhelming. I think initially there was a big fear about what would happen, and now it's kind of calmed down. There has been reassurance in general. We as a business have probably done quite well out of it. So I think the general thing is that, of course, people wanted help, and whether they be French or not. And the idea is that with that in mind, we were just able to give them that help, that local knowledge, you know, helping them with all of these elements that they've maybe forgotten. So even if they were French and they were coming back to France, they wanted our help. So for us, it was good. But generally speaking, I think the opportunities in terms of the development of France is massive. I think my way of looking at it is always that we're probably, in services at least, probably 5, 6 to 7 years, and I would have said 10 years behind the UK not so long ago, but France is catching up very quickly. And what I was saying, I think, to Catherine the first time we met is that for me, what's exciting here is if you've got a good idea of a service that works well, probably in the UK, most probably it isn't yet in France, and it would work over here because the demand is there. They just don't know it yet. Of course, the execution is the key thing, because having ideas is, you know, fantastic, and we can all have great ideas, but executing them and getting them right is, of course, the most difficult part, or at least the one that I found the most difficult. This, you know, kind of joins onto the next element, the financial support that can be had for new businesses, but also the demand for new services. And I think that is really key for me, for any of you guys that are thinking of launching or becoming bigger in your business environment in France. I mean, of course, recruiting people is a good thing. And today, let's face it, I mean, the web has created, and especially accelerated by COVID, this inability to actually recruit people all over the globe. So I don't think that necessarily barriers of countries matter quite so much when we're recruiting, because if we're a web-based company, then, you know, we can recruit people all over the world. The challenge there is, of course, finding the right individuals and being able to manage that. But I think what's really exciting about France, for me, is this demand for new services. And now that I guess I haven't completely made it with French Connections, but we're now in a stable position, and I'm very, very thankful for that. My mind is like expansion. What other things can we do? Where other services are? You know, I can constantly see that, and having experienced that massive level of service in the UK and in America, I just think, you know, there's so many more opportunities out here in France. And then it's all about knowing where to start your new business and what to do that and how you execute it, of course. One of the very much interesting parts, I think, for me, and to share potentially with you guys that might not know of this element, but in this map here, this describes what they call the rural areas of France. So these rural areas are called ZRRs, and they are subject to tax loopholes, essentially. When I mean tax loopholes, on corporation tax. So the beauty now is, of course, you own your own business. You can work from home because of the fact that it's now very much the common practice to be able to do so. And you could implement your business in any of these green zones, rural zones, and you'd actually benefit from a 5-year corporation tax exemption, and up to 8th year progressive to the 8th year. So really for 5 years, you've got corporation tax exemption. You've also got an awful lot of financial support when you're recruiting young people. You know, all these young people that I was saying are so good at their jobs and so motivated, etc. If you recruit people at under 26 years old in France, create a job for them, you're entitled to, I think it's actually even changed now because of COVID, it's even gone up to 5,000 euros. So, you know, recruiting people doesn't necessarily cost an awful lot of money today. And I think that's what's really attractive. But more importantly, look at all of the zones of France which are considered rural zones. It can be a fantastic opportunity to set your business, whether it be a web-based business or indeed, you know, a production business. So it's something that enables you then to obviously have that work-life balance quality, because all of those areas are pretty much beautiful, and of course enable you to have that other side of the spectrum, that life work-life balance. And I think that's the next thing. Of course, we've mentioned it. What does the introduction to French Connections do, and how do we work? Well, I don't want to bore you with all that again, and I'm more than happy, of course, to share more information if you would like to do so, and if it would be interest to you guys or to your companies to work with. But in essence, of course, as I mentioned, French Connections, very old idea of mine that was able to be developed and really thankful to the area that I grew up in first and foremost, but then to the great people that I recruited and to the massive support of partners. So what I was overwhelmed with was I created this small web-based company, and I was running it like the best I could. I've always worked in corporate and luxury corporate environments, so I was very much focused on customer service and how to get in touch with people. And the element that really launched me was Fabien from Fab French Insurance, which is one of the largest English-speaking brokers for France, and he provides. He works with loads of big companies. He contacted me one day. He said, "Hey, Richard, your website's really cool. I've got loads of people that would be interested in your services. Why do you limit yourself to the Gers?" And that's when we opened up to France, and that's when, you know, it really got wild and crazy with the amount of requests, and we had to recruit in consequence. And today I'm very glad to have been able to set up in the rural zone, because financially I've been able to grow the business, which probably I wouldn't have been able to do that so quickly without being in that rural zone with that tax exemption, but also being able to recruit the right quantity and quality of people. And today we have people working all over France, but we also have people that are working for us from the UK. That has posed a challenge to us, because we can't create employment for them quite as easily, so they have to be independent. But in general, you can the growth of the business can really be managed very well in France, because holding companies can be based all over Europe. So you can be running one business in France, but not necessarily have all of your businesses in one area. And I think, of course, I'm not an accountant, but there's an awful lot of advice out there on that. And one of our big partners, French Business Advice, that actually introduced us to the chamber, gave and can give, I think, all businesses some superb advice on how to structure, you know, multi-layers of business. For me, that's something that would be maybe in years to come. So when I get to the end of my 5 years of corporation tax exemption, maybe then a holding structure can be created for all of my various businesses. And again, loads of advantages there as well. So I think the key thing in France is, if you want to run an efficient business on the tax front, is you've got to have a really good accountant, like anywhere in the world, I guess. But there are a lot of ways of relaunching your business in a few years' time to be able to do that. So I think, again, for me, I can't emphasize more that it's been a really interesting and journey so far, but very exciting, because it's launching on different things. What we do at French Connections, because I've got to do a little bit of publicity here, forgive me, of course, is essentially we help English speakers across France. Now we've expanded to other countries, but we really help people that are wanting to settle in France. And it doesn't necessarily, this is what's crazy, we actually get a lot of French people that were working in the UK, and because of Brexit want to come back to France, that still come to us. Because today, over the last 2 years of existence of our business, we've grown into this kind of, what I wanted to be is more than, I hate this term, by the way, is a handholder. And there's lots of people that have lived in France for 20 or 30 years that charge you 30 euros an hour to be able to give you advice on how to register your car, etc. What we wanted to do is to have real experts in each field. And it was an organic growth. We grew our business based on the services that people were asking from us and what we could deliver. And the key point was we wanted to make this really a professional entity. We didn't want to be a small element, because I think what people do need in terms of these services is security, and obviously the help is the first element, but also the security of what the infrastructure provides. So on all of our services, we provide money back or delivered goods or money back guarantees. I run it, I joke about it, but I really want to run it like Amazon, you know, so you buy something and if you're not happy, we'll give you your money back, because we're not in that kind of business. And what I wanted to create is for my employees is a really lovely environment to work in, because I noticed all the mistakes that corporate environments made when they recruited me. I would have done so much more. It was nothing to do with money. It was all to do about the actual way that I was given opportunity to develop. And I think what we really want to have in this group is the people that work with me, or the partners that work with me, is this extremely radically open-minded attitude where, okay, you know, we can all work together. There's definitely this element of being extremely reliable that is key to our business, but also being really positive. You know, describe myself as a rational optimist. I think that's probably why I was asked, Catherine kindly asked me to speak today, because I think for me, it's in this doom and gloom that we're going through, and this, you know, financial turmoils, and Brexit, COVID, you know, you name it. I still think through all of that, there's some massive opportunities. There's some companies that are doing extremely well. There's always an opportunity to reinvent yourself. France, for all of those reasons, is actually probably a lot more supportive, I find, to be able to reinvent your company and change your things. Also, there's that personal approach. You know, you can go into a bank that you bank with and say, look, I'm struggling financially. Can we find a solution together? Whereas, you know, I would say that in the UK, that's a lot more complex to go in and speak to your bank manager, because it's all dematerialized and it's all online, etc., etc. So I think really, in essence, it's been such a great place for me to launch French Connections. And today, I'm really pleased to say that we've established a company with lots of employees that are specialized in each areas, that we really genuinely enjoy and love what we do. For me, it started off more as a hobby and now has become my main time job, right? I didn't really want to do this, guys. When I started off, I was just, this is to help me do and grow my real estate elements, which was really what I wanted to do. But, you know, life is what happens when you're busy making plans. And I guess what's been really rewarding for me was to create this environment for my members of staff and for my friends and colleagues. You know, that's really that element. And what's really cool is that people that work with me today, so there's lots of millennials that have, you know, joined from France, and we've created jobs, and we've given back to my local community, the small area that I grew up in, by creating these jobs and creating a business that works there. But also, I've been able to employ people that worked with me in the big corporate environments that I'd worked in the past. So that's really, you know, so I've surrounded myself with these people and all over the world. So there we go. In terms of my presentation of what we're doing, I see Catherine wants perhaps to wrap this up, but thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, obviously do let me know. I'll be more than happy to try and answer them.
I think there are some questions anyway, and thank you for this really positive attitude towards France. And I completely agree with you regarding services. We have still a lot to do and to improve, and I think we have a lot to learn from Britain. So that's something we will be delighted to do it and to improve. I see that in the discussion that Fiona and Etienne confirmed what you said. Would you like to add some more words, Fiona or Etienne, about workforce in France? Or have you any questions?
Just to say thank you to Richard, and yes, I totally agree with him. France has incredible opportunities. I'm the same as you, Richard. I arrived here, but much before you even appeared in the world. And I'm very thankful to France for the opportunities that I was given, and hiring millennials here, or very young people who've just finished their studies. You give them the opportunities, perhaps in somewhat a different manner of working in a large French company, but where they're given real responsibilities. They grow, and it's fantastic.
Thanks, Fiona. Claire, would you say a few words? You asked a question regarding Brexit.
Yes, but I have a new question now because Richard already answered in the conversation. So I'm Claire, I'm co-founder of CXB Hub, and this is a customer experience consulting company that we have created first in London and then in France, because we found out that British environment for customer experience was more advanced. So we wanted to have the company based in a more mature customer experience and employee experience environment. So my question is about what you call the ultra services. What is your definition of ultra services as you wrote in your presentation? And do you have a personal tip on how you detect in your services in the UK that you bring to France?
Yeah, I'll have to charge you for it, Claire. No, I'm only joking. But the idea is that I think anything that's and this is more business consultation. You know, something that I noticed. Look at all the things that work really well: Amazon Prime, Uber, Deliveroo. It makes it very easy for the client or for the consumer to purchase. So I think the first rule is that today we lose our attention span very quickly, and we want things to be very smooth and easy to do so. So I think anything that does that in the UK, and I'll take you one prime example, which is just started to happen in France, by the way, guys. If you want to be the first at it, you could probably beat them because they're not doing it that well, but they've had the idea. There's a perfect example in the UK, We Buy Any Car. So We Buy Any Car, you put your car reg in, you instantly get a quote, you can drive and you can get your car part exchanged for cash into your bank account the same day. That service doesn't exist in France yet. It's, there is someone that started doing it. I've had the idea about it for years, but it's not my thing. But genuinely, that is one element where you make it very easy for a client to be able to use your service. And I think in France in general, we have a tendency to overcomplicate services. So if you go onto a website that proposes a service, you go onto the website and it's very hard work. So you've got to assume two things here. The people may not be digitally inclined. That's the first thing. And especially the people with money might not even be able to use your website properly. And secondly, I think, you know, that the element of being able to use that website, there's a great concept that I've just noticed. We offer a service, Claire, to answer your question, with something that's completely concrete. We offer a service. We've got a couple of Americans here in France that are buying a chateau, and they're using our services to book their appointments to visit the places that they'd like to view. But they've also asked us to purchase a car for them, because whilst they're doing all that, they're renting a car and they would like to buy a car instead of renting one. So we bought a car for them. We charged them a fee for that. But then from buying the car, we bought the car in Paris. They want it in Pau in the 64, so down in the southwest of France. In the UK, there's another service called Shipley, where you can just put where you want something and it tells you how much you're going to deliver it. And loads of people compete to get the car delivered or to get any goods delivered. That kind of exists in France, but it's made really difficult. So you go, there's the spotty car or something like that. You put where your car is and you'll get quotes, but it's just so difficult to get a quote. So again, I just think that there's loads of, those are just two things that are linked to things that we do quite often. But in general, it's about creating something that's super simple. So if there's something that's super simple in the UK that works well in France, that it would probably work well in France as well. I never thought Uber Eats or Deliveroo would come to France, genuinely. I didn't think that would work, but look, it's a big thing now. So I think, again, something that makes, if there's something super simple in the US or in the UK, probably bring it to France, do the marketing well, and it will fly.
Thank you, Richard. I think Derek here at the chamber would like to ask a question.
Yeah, morning, Richard. Thanks very much for a very inspirational. It was exactly what I needed at the start of the academic year, and also as a fellow rugby player, I concur with how much not using, but you know, the links that you have through the rugby pitch are very advantageous. I've got a kind of question in terms of education, because I work in the education field. How much do you work in the education field in terms of you know, the British people coming to France and having lots of questions about the French education system and how it works?
Yes, well, thankfully we have my colleague Diana that was worked for Monaco University for a long period of time. So I tend to just pass the buck there, but there very much is a request for that. And we've, you know, again, Derek, the thing is a lot of the services that we provide are really truly organic. So it's through people that have asked us a lot, and then we've created those. So one of which is what we call purchase and consultancy. Because of my knowledge of buying houses here, I thought, oh, you know what, I could maybe offer that service to people that would be useful for them, and I can avoid them making mistakes that they might otherwise make. And throughout that, we've actually created a lead generation of people before they even want to come to France, you know, when they're just thinking about it. And that, of course, well, if they've got two 14-year-old kids, education is a big question, right? Second thing is, well, how would you recommend education in France? You want private international schools? Would you go down the route of, you know, public schools? Would you go down the route of private French schools? What are the options as, you know, teenagers, etc.? Fortunately enough, because I'm only still quite young, 33 years old, in fact, if you were wondering, but I can still remember and quite a lot of my experience from college, lycée, etc. here in France is still relevant. So I'm able to maybe point them in towards some directions and still have a relatively good understanding, because I'm recruiting lots of younger people. But there's definitely, again, a service idea based around education. But I think for me, I mentioned this to Catherine, I've got two types of clients: the ones that are already in France and the ones that are thinking of coming to France. And the actually ones that I can help the most probably are the ones that are thinking to come to France, because we can give them that consultancy knowledge, etc. And sometimes with education in particular, all they would probably want is just some consultancy. Is this viable? Can we do it? What can we do? You know, so yeah, definitely. I think there's a course that comes to mind. And the other thing I think that's really exciting, and for me, I look forward to this. We're getting younger people coming to France, younger people with families, with businesses, you know, that are moving for the very same reasons that I did for mine. You know, my parents happened to still be here. They were getting older and I wanted to be close to them, but also I wanted my kid to be able to go to the same school as I went to, because it's, you know, without my parents being multimillionaires, we went skiing every Wednesday. You know, I mean, that is the kind of quality of life. And the fact that we only had like 7 or 8 people in the classroom, and that level of education was fantastic with it all being free. So I think what's exciting in terms of education is that the profile of people that are coming to this country today are not just retired people that are buying a house in the sun, and, you know, they're actually 30-plus-year-olds that are web-based, perhaps, workers with young kids. And so they need loads of support throughout the education element, and just probably advice. So there we go. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I'll probably be in touch.
Cool.
As well. Thanks.
Hi, Tom. Tom, you are in Italy and you're going to come to France soon. So have you some questions? Do you have any, Tom?
Yes, hi, good morning. To Fiona, I don't at the moment. I found the presentation very interesting indeed. My focus, as I think Fiona knows, is on finding a role in a not-for-profit organization like UNESCO.
Mais tout est figé autrement.
Something similar. To go through all and really good to hear about the attitude. Having come from Italy, which is similar, Richard, in many ways to France, where I think the service culture that there is perhaps in the UK, and I see a very similar sort of gap in the market for those kind of things. As you mentioned, the sort of we buy any car example. I mean, in Italy, it just doesn't exist. So knowing that kind of attitude, that kind of mentality is very interesting indeed. And when I get to France, which will be at the end of the year in December, to Paris, I look forward to hopefully meeting you.
That's cool. I think that that you make such an interesting point that we are like the thing is with France, they are catching up very quickly now. It's like they were 10 years behind. Now services that French people of course creating these, but it's the execution that often is key to all of these launches, right? It's how do you get that? And I think in my humble experience, I think the kind of American work ethic, for instance, to services and to commitment to companies is fantastic. And you put that in those Latin cultures, it will work because it has to be particularly good. And of course, the expat market is one, but the French market is massive as well.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we see Deliveroo here in Italy has taken off hugely, especially during the pandemic. It's become, I mean, it's vast. I don't know how it is in France now, but I mean, it's in the short space of 3-4 years, 4 or 5 years ago. Well, 5 years ago, I mean, it was anathema to the Italian mentality to have people deliver food to your house. It just, you don't, you even just going out and picking it up and bringing it back was something something a little out there. But now the food service delivery service, it's just obviously with the pandemic, it accelerated it massively. And people are really very picky about food here, as I'm sure they are in France as well.
Any other questions? James?
Yeah, hi. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, Richard, I had a sideways question, as it were. How do you manage your clients' expectations? I mean, for those of us, who've lived in France for a long time, you know that when you create a business, you will immediately receive 2 letters from 2 organizations, one beginning with a well-known U, telling you that you owe them 129 euros when you haven't even made €1 of turnover. You will then get another letter from another organization beginning with D and a G, also telling you that you owe them 68 euros as well. So that's my first point, because I think you talked a lot about corporation tax. And having my own business in France, the problem with employing people in France, it's much higher up in the P&L where the challenge challenge comes. The second thing is I think that culturally, in Latin countries, we know that I'm afraid I'm like Fiona. I've been here rather a long time. We know that you tend to get a lot done without rather than with administrative interference, and that old-fashioned ways of doing business and talking to people rather than ringing some ghastly call center that's in Glasgow when you're sitting in London is a very different way, a different approach. So I was sort of wondering how you manage your clients' expectations. You know, as Catherine knows, I live 1 foot in the UK and 1 foot in France, or more likely 2 feet in France. But you know, I mean, we know that in France, you know, from a health perspective, you know that you have a pretty damn good chance of survival, whereas in the UK you have a pretty damn good chance of not surviving. You know, it always amazes my family, just as an anecdote, you know, it always amazes my family that in France you have a blood test at 7:30 in the morning and you've got the results at 9 o'clock. And even when you've already got cancer in the UK, you get your blood test results 2 weeks later after they've been taken. So we know that healthcare is fantastic, and that we all know that we also contribute more. And the flip side of that is that there is probably one of the best healthcare systems in the world. Education, you talked about, absolutely the same. The opportunity for everybody. I was laughing with my kids yesterday that you know, we had a new carpet laid, and the topics of subjects that I was talking about with carpet layers, you would never be talking about with carpet layers in the UK. You know, I mean, the guy walked into my house and looked at my dogs and said, "Do you chasse?" And so we talked about la chasse. I mean, can you imagine talking with the man from Carpetright in Reading about that kind of subject? Or you talk to your plumber about wine and foie gras, like you do probably quite often. You know, whether the guy in the UK has probably never eaten fish except out of a newspaper. So there are lots of amusing anecdotes like that, but I'm intrigued as to how you manage, because it's fine sort of, you know, if I was sitting in the UK saying, I'm going to ring you up, you're going to deal with the whole thing. But you're clearly going to come back with some massive questions and requests for information that people are going to be most surprised about.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, James, for the question to start off with. I'll try to sort of encapsulate all of those things there. But the first thing is, for us, I think this is really important to point out, in case it wasn't, you know, crystal clear. I was actually born in France. So I've lived in France and I was educated solely in France. I know it doesn't sound like it necessarily, but I've never been to the UK to scholarships or anything. In terms of my culture, therefore, I was brought up as a little French boy, you know, genuinely. And I would like to say that I was really fortunate because my parents only spoke English at home and I spoke French all the time. So I played rugby, and as a kid, I've grown up, I went through the education system, started working here in France. My first job was here. And then I've never been able to go anywhere without working. So I went to Spain for a year and worked because I needed the money, and I spoke a bit of Spanish and learned Spanish. And then I went to America because I realized whilst I was in Spain that I liked the English. It seems silly. In Spain, I realized I liked speaking English because I was on the Costa del Sol, English people everywhere. And my parents told me, well, whatever you do, don't go back to the UK because the weather's pitiful, the food's bad. So I thought, okay, well, I like speaking English. I'll go to California. At least the weather's better. And in California, I learned a different way of working and a different way of thinking about money and a different way of thinking about wealth. And what I actually quite enjoy, and I mention this to most of my American clients, is I like American people because in America, there'll always be someone richer than you. You know, so there's no so much of an emphasis to a certain extent with people that are earning, I would say, good money to brag about it. So they'll just buy stuff and they don't, you know, show off. They're just buying it because they need it. And the decision making is very quick. And the emphasis on quality of service is huge. And work ethic. These guys are crazy. They work like 72 hours a week. They're literally working every day of the week. So I learned a whole new way of thinking about stuff. And with that, by complete mistake, I ended up in the UK and I spent 11 years back in the UK. So myself, James, I understand very well, I think, and that qualifies me very well to understand the way of working in the UK and of thinking in the UK, in particular for you, James, not necessarily for everyone here, but in particular for the UK people. And I understand, very well the way of dealing with things in France, because I can make a phone call to the local prefecture because the guy used to train my rugby team when I was a kid. And yes, I do give him a phone call and say, come on, I don't have the right paperwork. Can you help me out here? And that was what was enabled me initially to start these procedures. The other thing was, however, is that I had that experience that I acquired from the US, and I realized that we had to be ultra professional in what we were doing. So instead of making up kind of the fact that I can do everything, I recruited people that can, that have got a double master's in French law, that know what it is to apply for the visa. That her father, in this context, was actually working for the French embassy in the US, and so all of those people that I've surrounded myself with enable me, James, to at least give precise information and help with certain areas that I wouldn't be able to on my own. That's the first point. And in terms of the second point, in terms of how do we deliver that information, I think what's really important to us is that other than in marketing, everybody that works for us on the shop floor are either French or are for one particular individual has been working for 18 years in France and living for 18 years in France with their kids, etc. So they really know, the both sides of the pond, so to speak. And I say both sides of the pond. That could be from any other English-speaking country where I joined Tom's way of thinking there, where there's so many services in the English-speaking world. That's kind of, there's a level you can't mess up in what we do, because today, as much as digital has been what made us grow immensely, and we have a whole marketing team behind us. I know it's crazy for a small company, but we have 4 people that work in marketing, and that's why we're able to grow quickly. But it's also, James, what could make us go down very quickly, because today everybody talks. And do you know what I'm really proud of? On top of being able to recruit people, create jobs, and that's the most rewarding thing for sure. The second thing is to maintain that level of quality throughout our growth. So, to put it in perspective, we started off with 2 people a year and a half ago, and we today turn over €1 million turnover, and we've got 12 people working for us. So that growth, that exponential growth, has created a challenge of its own, because you've got to continue with this customer support and service. And I'm proud to say today we've still got 5-star reviews on Google, on Facebook. They're not fake, they really are all people that we've truly helped. And I can't emphasize more than that. Actually, I think what all of my team get a kick from is the fact that we've been able to really truly make a difference to somebody's experience. And one in particular, James, to come back to just one anecdote on that, it's always stuck with me. It's actually clients that moved here that aren't that wealthy. That if you go on our Google trail, I think you'll find it. We help them with registering their motorbikes, a small thing. But she, you mentioned healthcare, this lady had recovered from cancer, and she was fully recovered, but she couldn't get healthcare support and cover. And thanks to our help, we were able to register their motorbikes, and we were able to find them a healthcare package that worked. And they didn't even have a French bank account, so we managed to work our way around all of that and get that sorted for them. And really, we weren't expecting any more, but they wrote such a beautiful and lovely and candid review from us to us on our page that that's the kind of stuff that for us really makes a difference. It's the fact that we can grow businesses, we are business orientated, but we can also deliver that kind of personal level of service, which definitely I've stolen from other companies, for sure. But I think it comes down genuinely from the fact that the points that you made, it's just cultural. I was saying to Catherine, I think the first time we met, do you know what? A lot of it is not to do about the language, because if I need to relocate to Australia tomorrow, I probably need services like I provide, because, I don't know what the culture is. I don't know what to do, what to say, what forms to fill in, etc. So above and beyond the translation element, what we offer is an insight into French culture because we are French or we've done this ourselves. Hopefully that answers comprehensively your question.
I know. Well, great to meet you, and it's great to have you know, that you've done this event this morning. It's you know, it's really important to have companies of smaller size involved. Our two businesses, I mean, mine's split between here and Morocco, but it's we're about the same size, both in financially and in number of employees. It's great. By the way, and I've been looking on my Orange, I can't find it. There is an outfit in Paris that buys your cars, and I can't for the life of me remember what it's called.
There's also one in London.
You take it in, and they look at it and they say this is worth 5,000 euros, and you give you a check there and then, and you leave on the keys.
Yeah, I think
just before you enter into that market, there is a bit of competition.
It was just an example, but I think the thing is that it's easy.
Anyway, I think we have to stop now. Thank you, James. James just wanted to say it's a member of the board, so we were delighted to have you with us this morning. So you can explain to other members of the board how it is nice to invest and to develop in France. And thank you, Richard, for this really excellent presentation. And Claire said in the chat that looking forward to your next season, how to become a billionaire in France. And I think we wish end on that note. Thank you to everyone. And
I've got an idea.
Yes, okay. And I hope to see you next week on the 21st for Guillaume Pépi. Guillaume Pépi is a former president of SNF, is an ENARC and all of this big establishment in France. And he would talk about entreprendre in France. So it should also be interesting. So I look forward to welcome you again. I wish you a nice day, and we will end that on this positive attitude. Thanks.